you can turn your cell phones off, that would be great. Just a little bit brief history of Campaign for Liberty. It was founded because America stands at a crossroad. We can continue to believe the guarantees of those currently in power, or can forge a new path, reinvigorating our economy, transforming our foreign policy, and securing our civil liberties. Our government was founded by amazing and great men. And according to Jeff Foxworthy, I don't know if this is really true, but I don't know if you've seen what he's written lately. It's attributed to him. But he says that it's currently run by idiots. I would like to believe that, but I don't. I believe it's run by evil men. But he makes some good points. If you can get arrested for hunting or fishing without a license, but not for entering and remaining in the country illegally, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses, but is run by idiots or evil men. If you have to get your parents' permission to go on a field trip or to take an aspirin in school, but not to get an abortion, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses, but is run by idiots or evil men. If you must show your identification to board an airplane, cash a check, buy liquor, or check out a library book, and rent a video, but not to vote for who runs the government, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses, but is run by idiots or evil men. If an 80-year-old woman or a 3-year-old girl who is confined to a wheelchair can be strip searched by the TSA at the airport, but a woman in a burqa or a hijab is only subject to having her neck and head searched, you might live in a nation that is founded by geniuses, but run by idiots or evil men. If the government believes that the best way to eradicate trillions of dollars of debt is to spend trillions more, you might, you know the story. If hard work and success are met with higher taxes and more government regulation and intrusion, while not working is rewarded with food stamps, WIC checks, Medicaid benefits, subsidized housing, and free cell phones, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses but is run by idiots or evil men. If being stripped of your constitutional right to defend yourself makes you more safe, according to the government, you might live in a nation that was founded by geniuses but is run by idiots or evil men. Campaign for Liberty's mission is very simple. It's to promote the great American principles of individual liberty, constitutional government, sound money, free markets, and a non-interventionist foreign policy by means of educational and political activity. Liberty is the noblest of political causes, and among political organizations, we stand alone in defending and promoting it consistently and comprehensively. With your help, we can prevent the American dream from being taxed, regulated, and spent out of existence. Since 2008, over 450,000 Americans have joined the Campaign for Liberty and taken a stand for our constitutional government and for our liberty. So we're glad you're here tonight. We have some great speakers, but I have a really quick announcement about something really awesome that's coming up. If you're a gun owner, do you get to shoot as often as you'd like? I do not. Okay? We have a campaign, we have a political action, we have a fundraiser coming up. And it's a way that you can get out, be with like-minded individuals, get some practice on the range, and benefit the Liberty Movement in Maryland. It's coming up really fast. It's this Saturday. How many people are already registered for it? I'll explain what it is. But are you already registered? Awesome. All right. Good. All right. It started out as a woman's event, but so many men wanted to come, and they couldn't always get an invitation. It's not not Sadie Hawkins Day or whatever. I don't know how that works, but so what it is, it's this Saturday. Men are now invited to become a part of it, even without an invitation from a woman. So it's totally okay. It's breakfast at the range at Horst & McCann here in Hickory, and it's to support the Second Amendment right for all the Marylanders. It's this Saturday from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be a great morning out, breakfast treats, throwing some lead down range. I love the way they wrote this down. And chatting with like-minded patriots. It's only $50. It includes breakfast, firearm safety class, firearm rental, 25 rounds of ammunition, targets, and 30 minutes in the shooting lane. Eye and ear protection are also provided. Range safety officers are on duty to guarantee safety, to provide help and advice when needed. You can rent and shoot 22s, 38 specials, and 9mm. And if you have something that shoots something else, you just must buy your ammunition there at Horse and McCann. So if you would like to join us, okay, it's only $50. It's for a great cause. It's with great people. Who do they see, Vicki? They see you in the back, right? And it's Sharon or Vicki?
And we only have about 10 left.
And we only have 10 tickets left. So I will forgive you if you rudely get up and walk back there right now in tow.
Door prizes.
And there's door prizes. Yes, you could take home a door. No.
I don't want to detract from our speaker, so I'm going to take your name and we'll set up. It's going to take a while.
Yeah, because Vicki's introducing our speaker. Good thinking. Okay, you will need a photo ID, you will need to sign a waiver and all that kind of good stuff. All state and local and federal license, whatever regulations apply, unfortunately. But that's this Saturday from 8 to 11, and please see Vicki. Don't lose out, don't miss out, get in on that. And it's going to raise a lot of money to help us defend your rights to keep and bear arms. Is that a good thing?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, we have some really special speakers here tonight, and as we always do we not have great speakers at Campaign for Liberty? Oh, yeah. And they're going to be speaking a little bit. They're going to have time for question and answers. We've got some other stuff about SB 281 resolutions, and we're going to have plenty of open mic night. We've already had people sign up, so you're going to get to hear from yourselves as well, so that's good. So let's give our undivided attention to Vicki Seitzinger as she introduces our special guest speaker.
What an awesome audience. Wow, look at this. We've got a lot of folks here tonight. The stormwater, the rainwater tax has been such a hot issue that we really thought it would be good to bring an expert in on this, and we're so thrilled. We have Chip Macleod from Funk & Bolton, a law firm that is representing the Clean Chesapeake Coalition. Now, the Clean Chesapeake Coalition is a coalition of 7 counties: Allegheny, Cecil, Caroline, Carroll, Dorchester, Frederick, and Kent. And these counties came together to look at fiscally sound and scientifically sound ways of approaching the kinds of environmental mandates that were coming down the pike. So that's what Mr. Macleod is here to talk to us about. Now, before we bring Mr. Macleod out, I want to know if there's anybody here from the county council, either representing the county council or the county executive. I know that we have Mr. White. Yes?
Jonathan White, I'm a legislative aide for Councilman Schroeds on the county council.
And is there anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. I want you all to know that invitations went out about a month ago to the county council and the county executive. The county council has decided that one of the ways that they're going to be addressing the rainwater tax is by forming a task force to look at new and innovative and out-of-the-box ways of addressing it. I can't think of a better event for them to attend. And yet Mr. Schroeds is the only one who thought enough to send his excellent representative. So I think we should give Mr. Schroeds a hand. I think that we should let our other county council members know that this was an opportunity they missed to be advocates for their constituents. And with that, I'm going to bring out Mr. Macleod.
Thank you very much, Vicki. And this is my associate, Gordon Smith. Everybody needs a Mr. Smith at their right hand to just take care of everything. So I'm happy to have Gordon with me. And let me, can you all hear me? I don't want to have to bend. And so a couple of logistics and everything. I want to make sure everybody has a pretty good view of that screen. Okay, I know those folks because I'm gonna really rely on this presentation on the screen. We were not able to give everybody a handout of this entire presentation. There are a couple handouts which I'm going to refer to, and I do want to make sure that everybody does get one of these. Okay, so if you don't have one of these, ask around. There should be enough for everybody to have at least one of these photographs. And there is another smaller handout like this. This is secondary to the picture. This whole presentation that I'm going to use as my guide to talk will be available on the Coalition website by Friday. So don't despair. If you see something you really like or you want to follow up on, you will be able to access all this online. Okay. So a couple things. Again, I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here. It appears that you all have some other business to tend to, but I will just observe that for this many people to be out on a weeknight and a somewhat pleasant evening to hear about an issue like this, I think is very telling. There is a sense around the state of Maryland that on certain issues, especially when it comes to how we're going about cleaning the Chesapeake Bay, how we're saving the Chesapeake Bay, everybody seems to have some thoughts or ideas about it. I will tell you real quickly that the Coalition, this is all about money. It really boils down to how much money taxpayers are spending or being asked to spend in the name of saving the Chesapeake Bay. A couple other just general comments. Again, as Vicki said, my name is Chip Macleod. I'm an attorney. My office is in Chestertown, Maryland, on the Eastern Shore. My law practice, ever since I started practicing law about 15 years ago, is predominantly representing local governments around the state of Maryland. That's really all that we do in the practice group that I'm involved in, representing counties, municipalities, school boards. So this is really what we do. The Coalition started late last summer when Dorchester County, the County Council of Dorchester County, started looking at their watershed implementation plan, their WIP. Some of you have heard of these WIPs. And they frankly had sticker shock. The price tag of Dorchester County's WIP, I think, was about $89 million, and their annual budget was $60. And they immediately started saying, wow, this is a lot of money. They called and said, Chip, we want you, we do work for Dorchester County, they're a client, so they called us and said, hey, help us understand this WIP. What happens when we approve it? Are we really committing to these expenditures? And, we, Dorchester County, we pretty much understand the Chesapeake Bay. I mean, Dorchester County is known as the heart of the Eastern Shore. When you understand the history of Maryland and the history of the Chesapeake Bay, there was a time when the politics of the Chesapeake Bay were governed by oysters. How many watermen were from each county, how many oysters were harvested. I mean, it was all about the oyster, and Dorchester County was in the center of it. They have a lot of people there that understand the Chesapeake Bay, the ebb and the flow, and how it works. And one of their observations was, looking at this WIP plan, is this really going to even work? I mean, this is expensive stuff, and we're not quite sure this will meaningfully improve the water quality of the Chesapeake Bay. So, what happens next? Dorchester County Council asked us, our firm, on their behalf to go out, reach out to other local governments, county governments in Maryland, to see if they shared the same concerns about what was coming down pretty fast and furious from the federal government through the state down onto the local governments. Many of you have heard about, I think, or hope, the Chesapeake Bay pollution diet, also referred to as the TMDL, Total Maximum Daily Load. So in December 2010, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and I'll get to the slides, okay, this is all preview. The U.S. the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency established a pollution diet for the Chesapeake Bay. And they apportioned to all the Bay states a part of that diet, saying each of you Bay states must reduce the amount of pollution that you're loading in to the Bay and its tributaries in order to meet some goals. the TMDL, okay? That's all fine. Well, as soon as that TMDL was set in December of 2010, the state of Maryland not only said, are we going to do it, we're going to do it faster than everybody, okay? Now, all the other Bay states are thinking, wait a minute, okay, this is a big undertaking. We all want to save the Bay. Let's agree to that. Everybody wants to save the Bay. And we don't have to quibble about the reasons to save the Bay. There's just so many good reasons. The debate is about how. It really is. How do we do it? And let's keep in mind, for 40 years, since Hurricane Agnes, we've been at saving the Bay. We've spent billions of dollars in the name of saving the Bay. And today, sad but true, the water quality of the Chesapeake Bay is no better. Now, we don't like to say that. We hate to be the ones to point it out, but it's true. The water quality of the Chesapeake Bay today is no better than it was 40 years ago. In fact, it may be worse. Okay. So back to my story, Dorchester County Council said, please go out, talk to some counties. Does anybody share our concern? Because we want to start challenging some of this. We want to start questioning what we're being told to do. Because when the pollution diet came down from EPA, the state of Maryland started to aggressively implement it. And how they chose to do it, okay, they picked some critical activities, the state of Maryland, to meet these goals. And we're going to get to those. I don't want to get ahead of myself. So we did go around, we talked to a lot of counties, and what happened is these 7 counties did agree to form the Clean Chesapeake Coalition. It's a growing or evolving coalition. We hope there will be more counties. And we think there's good reason for as many county governments as possible to coalesce for this reason. This is a nonpartisan coalition. I want to stress that. It really is about fiscal responsibility. So those are the counties and the objective. The objective of the Clean Chesapeake Coalition is to pursue improvement to the water quality of the Chesapeake Bay in a prudent and fiscally responsible manner. It really is that simple, and that's why I say this is about money. You know, none of the counties that are part of this coalition, and many of them border the Chesapeake Bay, are not interested in sitting on their hands and doing nothing. They just want to do what's smart. Okay, this photograph. Everybody has this photograph. Let me just say a few things about this. Right when we started representing or talking to county governments about forming this coalition, the U.S. Geological Survey, an independent group of scientists, came out with a report in August of last summer. And that report, and you'll hear about it a little bit later, basically said this, that the reservoirs above the Conowingo Dam are full. Okay? So just keep that concept in mind. Now this picture, what this picture illustrates, this picture was taken by NASA a few days after Tropical Storm Lee in September 2011. And what it depicts is a sediment plume extending 100 miles down to the mouth of the Potomac River. This sediment plume is emanating from the Conowingo Dam. Okay? If you look at the back of the picture, it says all that. Picture's worth 1,000 words. But the numbers are what are important. The amount of pollution that was loaded into the Chesapeake Bay by this single storm event. Now, throughout this presentation, you're going to hear a lot of numbers, and it gets kind of ridiculous when we talk about million tons and million cubic yards, but you got to keep track of a few key numbers. Because you're going to hear later about some of the state programs to improve the water quality and how much pollution those programs are going to be reduced. Compared to what's happening after large storm events at the Conowingo. But just this single event dumped 19 million tons of sediment into the Chesapeake Bay, 4 million tons of which was scoured. Now, this is a concept that's important for everybody to understand, and why the Conowingo issue is so important, and is what we say, the coalition says, the #1 priority to improve the Chesapeake Bay today is what's happening at the Conowingo. And I hope after this presentation you'll understand why. Scour. So what's happened at the Conowingo Reservoir, you actually have a number of dams in the Susquehanna River, okay? The last one is, the most southern one is the Conowingo. Above the Conowingo Dam is a 14-mile reservoir, okay? So this is like a big, ginormous stormwater management pond. It's the biggest, best management practice in the whole watershed. When you back up, and one of the things I hope you'll take from this too is how much in the weeds we've gotten in the name of saving the bay. When you step back and you look at this picture, and you realize this is a big stormwater pond at the Conowingo, and that thing is full. And any of you that are farmers or developers, or you understand about stormwater ponds, you know, they don't work when they're full. And when they're full, usually people are cited by some agency or told, you better dredge it. Okay? So that's exactly what we have here. We can really simplify this. Above the Conowingo is the largest stormwater management pond in the whole Chesapeake Bay watershed, and it's full. Scour, let me get back to that. So what happens, you have 84 years of sediments. The dam has been there for about 84 years. So you have 84 years of accumulated nutrients and sediments sitting above that dam. So the dam has been a gift to the Chesapeake Bay for all these years. It really has, because it has held back a lot of pollution. Okay, and the three types of pollution we're really focused on right now, the nutrients I referred to, nitrogen and phosphorus, and then sediments. Okay, those are the three main issues we're talking about. So the dam has been a blessing, but everybody has known that the day will come that it's going to be full. And when it's full, no longer does it function and provide that gift to the Chesapeake Bay. Because whatever hits that dam, when it hits equilibrium, it's just coming over, okay? So the benefit of the dam is now lost, okay? So just some basic concepts that I hope bring all this together. So whenever I mention to you an amount of pollution reduction that the state says we're going to achieve by spending certain money, I want you to recall these numbers and about how much pollution comes into the bay when we have a big storm event, okay? That's really what you have to keep in mind, because this is about prioritizing. It's not about, we've been characterized as saying, the counties that we represent, oh, you don't want to do anything, you're just pointing fingers. No, we'll do everything. Let's say that we'll do everything, but let's agree, we can't afford to do everything at once. Right? We can't afford to do it all. So let's at least start prioritizing, so what we do spend money on will actually make a difference. Okay? So that's all about the picture. Okay, the coalition itself, let me just say a little bit about what we're actually doing. The first thing is this. The amount of research that we've done for our member counties. We have undertaken a review and analysis of most of the significant studies that have been done about the Chesapeake Bay since Hurricane Agnes, so we can really understand what's going on. We hear all the time that the Chesapeake Bay is the most studied estuary in the world. And there are there's a lot out there about the Chesapeake Bay. We've all been told this. But our coalition, our member county said, we have to understand what's really accurate and what's just being said to us over and over again to somehow make it true. So we have spent a lot of time in the last 6 to 8 months reviewing most of the studies and reports out there about the Chesapeake Bay and about the Conowingo issue. Okay, that's one thing we've been doing for our member counties. So then the other critical activities for the coalition, the dam, the Conowingo Dam, and that whole system is up for relicensing before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Now, I'll refer to it as FERC. The rest of FERC, FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. That dam is up for relicensing. We are going to be intervening in that process on behalf of the coalition counties. This is where we hope other counties will join us because there is strength in numbers. We believe right now that the work we've done for the coalition counties is probably the most substantial understanding of what's going on and being prepared for that relicensing than even the state of Maryland. Okay, we have good reason to believe we've done more to prepare for that on behalf of county governments than what's going on in some other agencies. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. BMPs and WIP enhancements. BMPs, best management practices. One of the things our coalition counties believe as well is when the state and agencies say, here's the ways to improve water quality, here's the best management practice you should undertake, that they don't have a fair and simple system to suggest alternatives. And I'll give you one example, septics. Now, I know this group is very tuned into the issue of septic regulation. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But when these regulations come out about septics and say the best way to regulate septics is go to best available technology and all this expensive extra treatment, you know, one of our coalition counties says, you know, for a couple $100, you plant switchgrass above the septic field, right? Switchgrass, really, those roots go into the ground 6 feet. They really suck up all the nitrogen. Done. You've accomplished just as much. Makes a lot of sense, right? Well, my gosh, to get that alternative BMP duly considered is almost tougher than getting an act of Congress. And I hope there's no congressman here, but I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, it's not easy for a local government to say, well, what about this? Might this work or that work? All to achieve the same result. So we're really looking hard at the methodology and the way that EPA and the state of Maryland, the Department of the Environment, will truly consider alternative BMPs that might be recommended or suggested. The other thing we're trying to do is we're trying to advocate generally for an alternative cleanup agenda. You know, we're going around the state where people are willing to listen, and on behalf of our counties say, you know, look, let's really think this through before we commit hundreds of millions of dollars in the name of saving the bay. Let's just make sure we're actually going to make a meaningful difference. So we're advocating. All right. The Conowingo, I kind of talked about this, the ticking time bomb. And I don't want to get too deep into these numbers. They're there about how much pollution annually comes through the Conowingo Dam into the Chesapeake Bay. I do want to say just accumulated above the dam, and this is really the problem for the bay. And when I say the problem, if we really want to improve two things, if we really want to improve water quality in a cost-effective way, and we want to protect the investments we've already made below the dam, we got to do something about the sediments that are accumulated above it. I mean, we have spent so much money in the name of saving the bay. I mean, just look at this picture. You can't look at this picture and ask yourself, wow, did that wipe out everything Hartford spent somewhere on the shoreline doing some shore restoration project? Or, I mean, everybody looks at this and goes, yeah, I mean, that probably wasted a lot of money, kind of undid a lot of good work, right? Well-intended work, volunteers out cleaning up some stream bed. It's not to say we shouldn't do it, but we got to take seriously what's going on above this dam, or we are wasting a lot of money, taxpayer money. Okay, Lauren. So again, let me talk a little bit, just a bigger picture about why we think the Conowingo issue has to be priority number one. First, 50% of all the fresh water going into the Chesapeake Bay comes from the Susquehanna River. So just pure common sense, nothing else, half the pollution is coming from the Susquehanna River. The state's WIP, okay, the State of Maryland Watershed Implementation Plan that we're going to get to, doesn't mention this source of pollution. So we have a statewide plan with a $14.5 billion price tag that doesn't address the single largest source of pollution to the Chesapeake Bay. Now, here's the response we're getting since we've brought this up, and once people realize we can back up the things we're saying. Because at first, it was, no, that's not true. You don't. So once people realize this is true, then what we hear is, oh, but it's only half the problem. Well, yeah, but we can attack the biggest half problem first before we go and do what I've referred to, and I'll keep referring to, the busy work. That is very expensive, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, another reason Conowingo must be priority number one is what happens during large storm events. And Tropical Storm Lee, what happened here was devastating to the Chesapeake Bay, and it undid a lot of good work, and it wasted a lot of public money when this occurred. Now this was Mother Nature's doing, okay, but we got to factor this possibility in. And if we don't address the sediments above there, if we don't get up there and dredge what's in that reservoir, this is only going to keep occurring. Mother Nature's best filters for the Chesapeake Bay, the cheapest way to clean the water in the Chesapeake Bay is more oysters and more SAV, more submerged aquatic vegetation. Mother Nature made them. They are the most efficient, but guess what? They've been devastated. Why? Here's our reason why. Sediment. We think the sedimentation, the amount of sedimentation occurring in the Chesapeake Bay on a regular basis is what's killed, or is a large culprit, I'll at least say, in the demise of the oyster in the bay and SAV. Now, I will grant this. When you look at the history of the oyster in Maryland, and it's a sad, sad story that today we are at less than 1% of the historic levels of oysters in the bay. And you all have probably heard this before. There was a time when the number of oysters, natural oysters in Chesapeake Bay, filtered the entire bay in a day or two. A single mature oyster can filter 50 to 60 gallons of water a day. They actually really, the ecological, aside from how good they taste, okay, and all that, the ecological value of the oyster is unmatched. And yet, in the upper part of the bay, which used to be one of the most productive parts of the bay for oysters, you can't get them anymore. North of the Bay Bridge, forget it. We say it's because of sedimentation. State agencies say no, disease, dermo, MXX, over-harvesting. Okay, let's hit the watermen like we hit the farmers and talk about over-harvesting. I mean, we are well beyond blaming watermen for over-harvesting for being the demise of the oyster. And I have some charts to prove that. So that's another reason Conowingo must be focused on, because if you don't stop the amount of sedimentation coming down to Susquehanna, you don't have a fighting chance for the oyster to be restored in any meaningful way, and SAV the same way. And we need them both back to really help clean the bay. We, as taxpayers, cannot afford to do it without some help from Mother Nature. And this idea that we can grow enough oysters in laboratories and create enough sanctuaries to bring back enough oysters to save the bay is not going to work. Okay, you talk to any waterman, and sometimes you really have to go back to the people that understand the bay. Just like when you talk about regulating agriculture, it's best to talk to the farmers. Okay, ask any waterman about how you help bring back the oyster, and it's really not consistent with the way the state regulators have proposed to save the oyster in the Chesapeake Bay. Now here's another aspect that most people don't realize, but you really got to pay attention to this one if you're concerned about money, taxpayer money. The Port Administration, okay, the Maryland Port Administration, and the amount of money that they spend every year dredging shipping channels in the Chesapeake Bay to keep the Port of Baltimore viable, okay? We have a great port, okay? It's competitive. I mean, for the Port of Baltimore to stay competitive, there's a lot of things they have to do, because we got a lot of ports, Philadelphia, Norfolk, that's all competitive, okay? It's a big business. But the port is very important to the economy of this state. Because of that, they have to do a lot to make sure that shipping channels coming through the C&D Canal or up the bay are good, in good enough shape for the ships to make it up. Well, guess what? over the last 10 years, the Port Administration has spent about $1 billion dredging the shipping channels in the upper Chesapeake Bay in order to keep the Port of Baltimore viable. 80% of the sediment that they're removing is coming from the Susquehanna. Okay? So look at this picture again. Okay, and by the way, in the next 10 years, the Maryland Port Administration is going to spend another $1 billion dredging shipping channels, creating artificial islands. Now, this is another important thing. Open water dumping in the Chesapeake Bay is illegal. And by that I mean, in the old days, when you dredged a shipping channel or you dredged a marina harbor, you just took all the spoils and you found the closest place somewhere in the water and you dumped it overboard, right? Open water dumping. There was a big battle years ago involving Queen Anne's County and the state of Maryland over something called Site 104. And this was a site just off Kent Island, near the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, where the Port Administration was going to dump a whole bunch of dredge spoils from the inner harbor of Baltimore. Okay? They have to put them somewhere. And you got to keep the port viable. Nobody disputes that. But when they dredge and they pick up all this muck, they got to put it somewhere. So they were going to put it on what was called Site 104. Well, Queen Anne's County government back then said, you know, we don't think this is a good idea, because Site 104 was like one of the deepest parts of the Chesapeake Bay, and there was good reason to believe that that would be incredibly harmful to the environment, the Chesapeake Bay, for a lot of reasons. Well, the state said, no, we're going to do it. Queen Anne's County actually coalesced with some other local governments. They hired some lawyers, they hired some engineers, they did some studies, and lo and behold, they convinced the governor, then Governor Glendenning, to drop that idea of dumping those dredge materials from the inner harbor in Site 104. And then they went further and they made it illegal to open water dump in the Chesapeake Bay, because everybody agreed that was a bad idea. And instead now, when they take these dredge spoils, they put them on artificial islands, or they enhance existing islands. Pools Island, Hartnell Island, okay? Now these islands get full, so they got to start planning for new islands. So, going forward, the Port Administration is going to spend another $1 billion dredging and creating artificial islands in the bay to keep the port viable. 80% of what they're dredging is coming down into our bay, okay? And we just say this: would it be cheaper to dredge it above the dam than us paying all this money in Maryland to chase it all over to keep our port viable? It just makes no sense. The final reason this has to be a priority is the relicensing of the Conowingo Dam is underway. And that process, well, we're going to get into it right here. Thank you, Gordon. Let's talk about this for a minute. And again, this is really a reason we hope other local governments will consider supporting the coalition, if nothing else for this. The dam, the Conowingo, now keep in mind, there are some other benefits of the Conowingo Dam other than its trapping what it used to serve as a sediment trap. It is a hydroelectric dam. In other words, it creates green energy, okay? And that's a good thing. There are turbines, and it's interesting, the more we've learned about the Conowingo, I'm fascinated by this, that the original turbines from 1928 are the ones that are still functioning. I'm doing this because the water runs through the bottom of that dam and these things spin and they make electricity. I mean, that's cool. So the owners of the dam, Exelon is the energy company that owns the Conowingo Dam. This is a good thing in their portfolio to have a hydroelectric dam that produces green energy. But there's this other important issue to us below the dam, and that's what we're going to do about all those sediments that have accumulated up there. The dam was last licensed in 1980. And it's up for relicensing, and Exelon is looking for a 46-year license. So this is literally a once-in-a-generation opportunity to try to put some conditions on the way that dam, that facility is operated, and see if we can get some conditions that help our Chesapeake Bay. I mean, a simple, obvious condition is at least maintenance dredge. I mean, whose job should it be to at least dredge what hits that dam annually? as opposed to, not even getting into what's sitting there, the legacy sediments. If people always ask, well, what's it going to cost? This would be a very expensive undertaking, but I will show you it's cheaper than what the state's telling us to do to save the bay through septics, stormwater management retrofits, and wastewater treatment plant upgrades. I'll show you that. But we've seen one estimate that from Exelon that to dredge just the amount of sediments that hit the dam each year might be about $60 million. That's a year to dredge just the new stuff. Doesn't even touch what's sitting there. That really is what we need to get out of there in order to get the trapping capacity back to give the bay some breathing room. Okay? Now there's another thing, let me say a few more things about this relicensing that are very disconcerting to the counties that we represent and should be disconcerting to everybody that cares about the bay. We have been following what's going on at FERC. We will intervene. By the middle of June, we will formally intervene on behalf of the member counties. But in the meantime, we've been told that there are settlement negotiations underway among 23 parties. We've asked FERC who those parties are. Can we, local governments in Maryland, remember, we represent local government officials. I look at local government officials as representatives of the taxpayer, that's obvious, okay? And local government officials are really the last line of defense. As stuff gets pushed down from the federal government to the state government and down to the local courthouses, that's it. That's the last line for some elected official to say, time out, before I commit my taxpayers to this activity, I want to make sure I know what's going on. That's a very fair reaction to some of the mandates that are being pushed down today. So these settlement negotiations that are underway, we don't know who's part of it. We're not. We've asked to be. We've asked for a list of who's part of it. I can tell you who I'm pretty sure is part of it. But that's the process that's underway right now. Let me make one, okay, that's good, you can go there. But before we get to this, and you all really like this slide, but one more thing to understand about the sort of the science and issue for our Chesapeake Bay. Sand, sediment, when I say sediment is really comprised of three things. Heavy sand, okay, clay, and silt. Clay and silt are much lighter, the sand is heavier, okay? What happens with the Conowingo Dam and the way it traps, it's trapping the heavier stuff. So the good sand doesn't get into the bay, but what we get during this kind of event, we get the clay and the silt. We get the light stuff, okay? The kind of stuff that once it settles, it just takes some wind and things get stirred up. There's a website you all should be familiar with. The Department of Natural Resources has it, Eyes on the Bay, Gordon? There's something called Eyes on the Bay. There's a website. You can go in there and type in any date and you get a satellite image from the exact same location. Now some dates, if it was cloudy, all you see is white. Okay? But you pick any date, remember a big storm, remember something, and go to that website and type in the date, and you'll be amazed at what you see as far as the satellite imagery. I mean, believe me, we've done it. We've looked at a lot of key dates of storm events we know about just to see this evidence. But the thing about sand is this. You know, the Upper Bay, our theory is sand deprived because you need good sand, and here's why. When the sand comes down, it goes to the shorelines, right? And you don't have as much erosion. All right? The other thing is the heavy sand allows the SAV to plant its roots and stick. When you talk to watermen or other people familiar with the bay after big storm events, what they see are SAV, roots and all, floating down the bay. That's because they don't have a good place to attach. Because we're not getting the good sand, we're getting the junk. Okay? And the bottom of the bay has a lot of this silt, and it's just, as soon as the wind blows, it's a mess. Because people have said, you know, we've made this presentation, and somebody always says, well, just think how bad it would be if the dam was never built. Now, I'm not a scientist, but this is my answer to that question. I've read enough on this that I say this. If that dam was never built, Mother Nature would have a way of assimilating all that runoff and all that erosion as it comes down in a more gradual way. Because what happens because of the dam is during these big storm events, we get a shock, okay? Mother Nature doesn't have a chance to assimilate it into the whole bay. So I haven't answered that question, that statement about, well, don't be so mean about the dam because if it was never built, the bay would be terrible. I'm not so sure about that, you know, because more sand, we'd have a lot less shoreline erosion if we had more sand naturally coming down. Okay, enough about that. Okay, you remember the mission of the coalition? To pursue improvement to the water quality of the bay in the most prudent and fiscally responsible manner. Okay, the state has a plan. The State Watershed Implementation Plan, the WIP. I will say this plan, everybody should understand, was not approved by the Maryland General Assembly. Okay, there was no legislative act that approved this plan, and yet this plan has been submitted to the US EPA as Maryland's plan to meet the EPA goals. The price tag is $14.4 billion through the year 2025. Now that money is coming from us. That's, you know, remember where government gets its money. I don't care whether it's federal, state, or local. It's all coming from the taxpayers. So we always hear, you know, we hear this a lot. Chip, you know, your governments, they ought to relax because the federal government's got grants and the state's got grants, and that's not the issue anymore. We're so beyond that sort of shell game. We are down to the courthouses, the local elected officials saying, wait a minute. So let's talk about the state's plan. And these are the critical activities from as far as the state of Maryland is concerned to meet these goals and save the bay. First, we're going to spend more than $7 billion on stormwater management. Now, you all have heard a lot about stormwater retrofits. I know in 10 jurisdictions, the 10 largest jurisdictions, we have this concept of the rain tax that everybody's heard about. You know, all these activities may very well improve water quality, somehow, somewhere. But let's, again, keep in mind, we want the best bang for the buck, because there's only so much money to go around. And keep this in mind as well. When you ask local officials to prioritize what their taxpayers want, and I think you can trust local officials to have a pretty good pulse on what the local taxpayers want, I'm not aware of any county in the state that the #1 activity is environmental or saving the bay. Now, I guarantee you, it's on everybody's list. But I would venture to say public education, public health and welfare, public safety. I mean, you eventually get to the environment, okay? But first on the list, not so sure. So again, the reason to make sure what we are committing to makes sense. So stormwater. Now, remember I told you to keep in mind numbers. So look to the right, the stormwater activities. Now, of that $7 billion, by the way, 1.5 is going to be the Department of Transportation retrofitting stormwater facilities around highways. 1.5 billion Department. The rest is local governments for stormwater. Now look at the results. So in the state plan, if you spend all this money, they say, let's take nitrogen, N. With all that money spent, we're going to reduce the amount of nitrogen through stormwater management by 1,100 tons a year. Okay, now go to the back of your picture. From this single storm event, 42,000 tons of nitrogen were dumped into the Chesapeake Bay. Let's take sediment, bigger issue, from stormwater. We're going to spend $7 billion on stormwater, and we're going to keep 300,000 tons out of the bay. Good, that's a big number. Oh, but look, after Tropical Storm Lee, 19 million tons of sediment. So this is where you have to really pay attention to what we're being asked to spend and what are the anticipated results, and then say, are we really getting the best bang for our buck? Let's jump to septics. And this is, I have to say, this is the most astonishing to me. This is a simple fact. What was sold to the General Assembly and the people of Maryland as a means to save the Chesapeake Bay was not that at all when it comes to regulating septics. And this legislation that was passed a few years ago that requires local governments to create these tier mapping systems. Because if you look at the testimony, and even in the preamble of the legislation, it says we are doing this to meet the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. Remember the pollution diet? The legislative intent says we're doing this to meet the TMDL. So look, we're going to spend $3.7 billion. And I say we, whoever has a septic tank is spending $3.7 billion. And what are we going to get? We're not going to reduce any phosphorus going into the Chesapeake Bay. We're not going to remove any sediments going into the Chesapeake Bay. But we're going to remove some nitrogen, 620 tons a year. And again, Tropical Storm Lee, 42,000 tons in a single event. That's a lot of money for a very little result in improving the water quality of the Chesapeake Bay. And I'll also say this, you know, we're told all the time, and read the articles, this is a little homework assignment for you. When you read any article about the Chesapeake Bay, and you have environmental groups quoted, see how often they refer to the blueprint for the Bay or the Bay TMDL as the scientifically based pollution diet, the scientifically based blueprint. Okay, they keep saying it because they want us to believe it. But I will tell you this, there is no science supporting regulating a septic tank in Allegheny County in order to save the Chesapeake Bay. I mean, I don't know how long it will take any nitrogen from a failing septic in Allegheny County to reach the Chesapeake Bay, but I'll guess, I don't know, 100,000 years? I don't know. But, and here's the other thing, get this. So EPA, now remember, everything we're doing is based on EPA's pollution diet, okay, this TMDL. Now the TMDL, there's a document, you can find it online, it's on our website, it's called the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. It gives you all the goals and what everybody's supposed to do. Well, you know what the EPA says about septics? Nothing, except they say this, only failing septic tanks might pollute groundwater. Okay, so EPA didn't tell any of the Bay states, when you go back and do your WIP, focus on septics. That was a Maryland decision to focus on septics, and it was a Maryland decision to sell it as a means to save the Bay. Wastewater treatment, you can look at the numbers and the cost. I mean, let me say this about wastewater treatment plant upgrades. There are some old wastewater treatment plants that should be upgraded to be efficient. There are wastewater treatment plants that when it floods, they overflow. That should be stopped. You know, the coalition thinks if we're going to upgrade, if we're going to spend money on upgrading wastewater treatment plants, let's modernize the very old plants to at least BNR, biological nutrient removal, not to go jump to with this highest state of technology called ENR, and then focus on these plants that get flooded during big storms. Those are the ones that really need to be upgraded. Instead, the state decided, let's just go upgrade all the biggest treatment plants to this highest level of technology, ENR, and when you do the math, if you pick any project the state has done, and you look at how much pollution loading was reduced and the cost, it's astronomical. Okay? I'm not going to get into agriculture other than, this is what's interesting. Agriculture is one of the largest sources of pollution to the Bay. There's a way to help through that. The farmers are doing a terrific job doing what they can to manage the amount of nutrients that run off their farms. Okay? It's just sort of ironic that in the state plan to save the Chesapeake Bay, the least amount of funding is devoted to agriculture. And yet behind the Conowingo and the Susquehanna River, it's the next largest source of loading to the Bay. So this chart sort of reiterates what I just said. And again, pictures are worth 1,000 words. This is a chart showing sources of nitrogen to the Chesapeake Bay. The big one is total bay-wide, how much nitrogen is loaded into the bay. The next bar is what comes from the Susquehanna River, okay? Annually, 71,000 tons. The next is agriculture. The source of nitrogen, agriculture, 55,000 tons a year. But look at the next three. And these are the key activities according to the state plan. Wastewater treatment plant upgrades, septic, and then finally, stormwater retrofits in the MS4 counties, which are the counties that have the rain tax. See how much loading? Okay, so that's 3,500 tons a year. That's the source we're going after at the greatest expense. Okay, I've already talked about what's flawed about the Bay TMDL, and that is, if you look at Appendix T of the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, it's all about the Conowingo Dam, and here's what it says. It said the EPA, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, says we are going to assume when we set these goals that the trapping capacity at the Conowingo will remain until 2025. We have a study, an independent scientific study from August of 2012 that says that day is now. It's not 2025. So right there, we, the coalition, say the model's flawed. And everything we're doing in the name of meeting those goals has to be questioned because that's a huge assumption for EPA to make. They even use the expression business as usual at Conowingo as we set these goals. And that's just not the case. And then I mentioned the state whip, no mention of the pollution loading from the Susquehanna River. The other, I think, glaring omission in the state's whip is there's an appendix in the Bay TMDL Appendix U that says Maryland, Virginia should include in their plans oyster restoration plan, a comprehensive plan to restore the oyster because everybody recognizes the ecological value. Well, the state whip makes no mention of oysters. Okay, now, the state is doing a lot with oysters, but we don't believe there's a coherent statewide plan, bay-wide plan of the state of Maryland to really restore the oyster. They've basically given up on the upper bay because they know the sedimentation is such an issue. The next slide, better to focus above the dam, not below. I've already talked a lot about the Port Administration, but these are real numbers. Let me give you one example. After this event, the Maryland Port Administration spent $25.6 million dredging about 1 million cubic yards of sediment. So there's a direct connection that when this occurs, Port Administration spends $25 million, just like that. Again, isn't there a way to try to address all this above the dam as part of this relicensing that's going on before we continue to chase it at great expense below the dam? So, said enough about that. Okay, and I'll finish up. Vicki, I have a few more minutes.
We have you until 8:15, and that includes a question and answer.
Oh, and I want to leave time for questions, but I'm almost finished.
Go ahead.
I'm proud of myself for getting this far, because I usually get so off on a tangent. You all have been very patient, and I hope it's making sense. Now, the next few slides, I'm going to point out some things that reaffirm that make the counties we represent reaffirm what they're doing, that we're on the right track, that we're on to something. I mean, we knew when we first came out publicly and started talking to people about this issue and saying, you know what, we really should start questioning what we're being told to do. It's time to, every time a state agency says, you shall do this, maybe it's time to say, well, wait a minute, show us the science, prove it, let's really think about this. And when we started doing that, when I say we are coalition counties, once we did enough research, our counties got comfortable starting to question, because we were there supporting them in their questions. We did enough research to say, hey, listen, you can now question them on X, Y, and Z. So we started doing it, and let me talk about some of the correspondence that resulted and some of the things we were told. So the first one, in December, the Secretary of Environment responded to a letter from State Senator E.J. Pipkin. Senator Pipkin, I will say, early on when the coalition was first forming, he was very supportive. He was very familiar with the issues we were talking about, given the district he represents. But he had written a letter to MDE, and he got a response. And he had said there's a lot of issues with the Conowingo, things that I've been saying. And he was told by the Secretary of the Environment, although Tropical Storm Lee was a major storm, the bay, and in particular, the submerged aquatic vegetation covering the Susquehanna Flats at the point where the river joins the bay have been recovering, and as a result, were resilient enough to weather the storm and continue on their path to recovery. Now, if you read that letter from the Secretary of the Environment, and you know how important SAV is to the bay, you think, yeah, SAVs are coming back. Okay. Here's the facts. After 25 years of SAV recovery, Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee really wiped it all out. Okay? The Department of Natural Resources was quoted in an article in 2011 saying in lower areas of the bay we found a lot of pieces of freshwater SAV that had just gotten blasted down the bay. And again, there's all this anecdotal evidence from watermen who were on the bay shortly after these storms, and they talk about floating islands of SAV, just moving down the bay, roots and all, because there was really no good sand for them to attach to. It gets better. Scientific fact. This is a study that just came out in April of this year by the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. You see all those red? That's everywhere where SAV has declined. Okay? 24% decrease between 2010 and 2011 and 12. In the Upper Bay, 32%. Lowest amount of SAV in the Bay since 1986. And yet the Secretary of the Environment was telling a state senator SAV on the rebound. Net. The Virginia study went on to show in some of these tributaries how much we lost SAV in a year. And look at these numbers. Okay? This is lost SAV after Tropical Storm Lee. One more scientific fact on this issue. This comes right from the Chesapeake Bay program. Okay? And they're quoted in their own press release from this year. Losses of Bay SAV in upper and middle Bay zones most likely reflect the effects of Irene and Lee in fall 2011 and resulting sediment they added to the system. So the Bay program says this, and our Secretary of the Environment tells a state senator SAV is on the rebound. And here's the final slide on SAV. 1985 is the first. That's the Susquehanna Flats. We keep hearing, look how many times they celebrate what's happening at the Susquehanna Flats, that we can all rejoice that everything we've spent is working. 85, 2008, and then 2012. That's what's happening at the Susquehanna Flats when it comes to SAV. Okay, the next thing, consistency, we just want to bring to your attention. The Secretary of the Environment last November wrote to the President of the Dorchester County Council. Now remember, this all started with the Dorchester County Council. They wrote a number of letters at the beginning when they were forming this coalition. They wrote to a lot of agencies to get answers before they reached out to their fellow local officials. They really wanted to do this the right way. Well, the letter back from the Secretary said, relax, okay? Not as all bad, because the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the state of New York, which make up most of the Susquehanna watershed, are spending millions on their own whips and are focused on controlling pollution from all of their sources, just like Maryland. This is an important thing. Remember, the pollution diet is not just Maryland. Maryland's percentage of the pollution diet is 20%. That means Pennsylvania, New York, Virginia, D.C., everybody's supposed to be doing something. Guess who's doing the most? Maryland. Now think of this. It's good to be first in a lot of things. You know, we hear we're first in education in the state of Maryland. That's awesome. First in a lot of things. To be first in saving the bay when we're a downstream state is unaffordable. Think of that. If nobody does anything else, could we actually accomplish it on our own, Maryland, below the dam? That's tough, but that's what it seems like we're doing, and let me show you why. So we hear a lot, relax, Pennsylvania's doing a lot, and when Pennsylvania gets their act together, there'll be a lot less pollution coming down. Well, our state WIP has a $14.5 billion price tag. Here's what we don't know about Pennsylvania. What taxes and fees have they imposed in the name of improving the water quality of the bay? What regulations have they imposed on farmers and landowners and septics in the name of improving the water quality of the Chesapeake Bay? Okay, there's a list of questions here. What's in the budget for the state of Pennsylvania, put in there by the legislature for improving the Chesapeake Bay? I will dare say this, it's nothing like what's happening in Maryland. So what's happening above the dam and what Pennsylvania is doing, you really have to pay attention to, and we got some more on that in a minute. Well, here it comes. Here's another inconsistency. Again, the same letter from the Secretary of the Environment to Dorchester County said, water quality monitoring in the Susquehanna River demonstrates that the upstream states are making significant progress in reducing pollutant loading to the bay. Really? The Chesapeake Bay Foundation acknowledges that, and they did this in their Bay report, State of the Bay report in 2012, the U.S. Geological Survey study indicates long-term pollution trends are downward above the dam, okay, Pennsylvania. So our State Department of Environment says Pennsylvania's doing their part. Chesapeake Bay Foundation says they're doing their part. We say what's missing is any raw data to prove those statements. And then look at this. You all have read about this. And I apologize for these pictures, but it is what's happening. We all know the Susquehanna River is a troubled body of water. So troubled, okay, there's a battle royale going on to have it declared an impaired waterway. So you have, and so you've heard about this recent study about the smallmouth bass and how that population has been depleted, I think 80%, and it's just bad stuff in the Susquehanna River. So keep in mind, water flows downhill. Any bad story you read about the Susquehanna River, you gotta assume is coming our way, okay? And especially with the lost trapping capacity at the dam, okay? So we have this debate about whether it should be declared impaired. Who's resisting that? The state of Pennsylvania Department of the Environment, saying no, not yet. So how can you say that Pennsylvania is as aggressively trying to meet the Bay TMDL goal like Maryland, when their own Department of the Environment isn't even ready to declare the Susquehanna River, which is our largest source of fresh water, impaired? Once they declare it impaired, then the regulations really mean something. The clock starts ticking on making real water quality improvement. It's no small decision. I understand why Pennsylvania is resistant to agree. But the fact that they are tells us that our neighbor states in the north above the dam are not doing as much as Maryland is doing. There's litigation in Pennsylvania. Now, the state is not a party, but the American Farm Bureau, I think a home builders group, have sued the Department of the EPA over the Bay TMDL. So, all is not rosy in Pennsylvania when it comes to how to improve water quality. And you have these state agencies in Pennsylvania that are at odds. The Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission is really concerned about the health of the Susquehanna, once declared impaired, and the Department of Environmental Protection says no, not ready. So this talk about Pennsylvania's doing its fair share or equal part, not so. There's a picture of a very sick fish. And then these next three slides, this is really something too. This is more about disparity of impacts below the dam and above the dam. Now, we have pollution in Maryland. Our farms do contribute to some of that. Nobody's disputing that. But Maryland is doing a lot to save the bay. We've spent billions of dollars trying to improve or reduce the amount of pollution going in our waterways. We are. But get a load of this comparison. We hear, ever since this coalition has formed, a lot of state agencies keep pointing out the pollution in the Choptank River. And geographically, you have to understand the Choptank is right there with Dorchester County. And I personally think this is part of the state saying, how dare Dorchester County form a coalition and talk about issues like this when in their own backyard you have such a polluted river like the Choptank, okay? So we keep hearing how one of the worst polluted rivers on the eastern shore is the Choptank River, okay? And a lot's being done to try to improve it. But look at the comparison. So nitrogen, 1.69 milligrams per liter in the chop tank. That's not good. But in the Conestoga River, okay, and if you're familiar with Pennsylvania, there's a lot of intense agriculture activity in the Conestoga River Valley. 7.73 milligrams per liter. That's 357% more nitrogen in that water than in the Chop Tank River. Let's go to phosphorus. Chop Tank River, 0.078 milligrams per liter. Conestoga River, 0.364. 366% more phosphorus in that water in the Conestoga River than Chop Tank. And then sediment, this is staggering. 14 milligrams per liter of sediment measured in the Chop Tank River, and in the Conestoga River, 125 milligrams per liter. That's almost 800% more sediment measured in that water. Now, we're going to do our part in Maryland, but we can only do so much to compensate for this too, because all this is coming our way, and more of it's coming in the bay because we don't have the trap benefit at Conowingo. One more, because you're probably, but this is important. This is just another inconsistency. Again, letter from the Secretary of the Environment to Dorchester County. Because when Dorchester started the coalition, they sent this picture to everybody. We actually blew it up. We sent posters because they really thought, if you care about the Chesapeake Bay, you can't take this and go, yeah, whatever. But it happened. We got, yeah, whatever, it happens once every 50 years. Yeah, whatever. We even heard from, at a testimony in Annapolis, it was explained to a committee when we kept showing this, well, you have to remember, this is the sun reflecting a certain way, and this is just a sheen, okay? This is just like a sheen, okay? But here's the important thing. The State Department of the Environment says to Dorchester County, relax. Fortunately, storms of that magnitude occur infrequently. On average, in 1 out of every 20 years, 5% of the time. That's what the Secretary of the Environment said to the Dorchester County Council when they showed this to the state and said, shouldn't we be concerned about this? Well, guess what? If you look at the next chart, that estimate of 5%, 5% over time, that was underestimated by 250%. Because in fact, if you look at this chart, and I know it's hard for many of you to see, ever since Hurricane Agnes, we've had some whopper storms that dumped a lot of sediment into the Chesapeake Bay. And I'm talking about scoured sediment. Now remember what I started at the beginning? Not just the sediment that we're going to get. We're always going to get stuff from the Susquehanna. But what's been trapped is now being scoured. When the storm gets big and the water gets turbulent in the Susquehanna and it's flowing fast, it's grabbing all the old stuff too. Now that's a problem, okay? And it's such a problem if you look at these significant storms, they add up to 49 million tons of sediment being scoured in a few weeks' time. When average, a year, we get 2.5 million tons of sediment from the Susquehanna. We're going to get that no matter what. 2.5 million tons are going to come in. But because of these storms and the scour, almost another 50 million tons. In a shocking way, not a slow way where we can assimilate it, boom, into the bay. So that was wrong to say, don't worry about this picture, it hardly ever happens. And then the next slide talks more about that. And here's another thing you'll hear. Because I say, once the dam reaches equilibrium, where the amount of water that comes to the dam comes through it, that's a real problem. And they'll say, well, we're not there yet. And there's still people, even though we have this scientific study from August of last summer that says, for all intents and purposes, it's full, the reservoir is full, we still have people that say it's going to be full in 10 years, it's going to be full in 15 years. Here's the trick. Because of this scouring, it's never going to be full. Because every time there's a big storm, so if you own the dam and you're worried about the day it gets full, when Tropical Storm Lee comes, you're like, whew, that just added 2 or 3 years of trapping capacity, right? I mean, think about it. So don't get lulled into some false sense from anybody saying, oh, it's kick the can down the road, yes, it's going to be full. It never really gets full because we have this problem of scour and the storm events. And that's it. That's enough.
How deep was it and how shallow?
What's that?
How deep was it, like back in turn of the century, and how shallow is it now?
You mean the reservoir?
Yeah, because my depth finder, when I went across where you can 9/11, you go and get so close.
Yeah.
It's reading about 50 foot at the deepest in the middle.
Well, it's an interesting question, and we have on our website some pretty good graphics and cutaways of how that reservoir looks as full as it is. And you have to understand, and because some people do this right away, they think, and if you've ever been to the dam and you drove across it and you kind of think, wow, what's behind there? All this sediment is not necessarily stacked up against the dam, okay? The turbines for the dam are actually at the bottom. And just by natural hydrology, there's always space between all the sediment and the bottom of the dam because the water still gets down there, okay? So it's not like it's all built up there. You got a 14-mile reservoir, and there's different elevations and all that, but the latest scientific studies say 85 to 88% full. And we say, at that, that's about it. Because with the scour and all that, you're never going to sit there and go, oh, there's a study that says 100%. So the depths, it's different at every place. And but there is some interesting stuff on our website. And there's actually a lot out there about what's the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, is a wealth of information about the studies they've been doing about the Conowingo for a long time. Yes, sir. Well, there's a lot of, first off, let's just learn from experience. What does the Maryland Port Administration do with dredge material? They're finding a place to put a lot of dredge material, and they're doing it on artificial islands. I've heard, there's a lot of ideas. There's some of all these old quarries and mines near that could be a site. There are places that are looking for topsoil. I've heard of ways to pipe it. Here's our issue. How you get rid of it, that's what we have to address. Nobody, this is very important, I should have mentioned this earlier. Today, no single government agency or group of government agencies, no business, nobody is responsible for doing anything. Now think of that. What I've just presented about what's going on at the Conowingo and what's there, nobody is responsible for doing a thing. So this relicensing is so important because, and this is not Exelon's problem to fix alone. I want to make that clear too. Some people say, well gosh, Exelon didn't put it there, but they own the dam, they operate it, they do benefit from the electricity generated, and until somebody is on the hook for doing something, how do we get Congress to take this seriously, or the other states? I mean, nobody is responsible. And this thing about being studied, by the way, you'll hear that the state of Maryland is doing a study. So let's relax, there's a study underway. Well, if you look all the way back to 1985, there's been studies about what to do about this issue, and it gets studied to death because every study that's done, there's nobody to hand it to and say, okay, implement it. So the question is a good one, but we're a pretty smart bunch of people, and I gotta believe there's a way to figure out what to do with it. There's beneficial uses. Now that's not going to dredge out the whole, making an alternative aggregate is not how to get rid of all that sediment, but somebody's got to figure it out. And to say, we don't have an easy or cost, a simple solution is not really the answer as far as we're concerned. So there's options.
Sir, can I ask 3 questions? Very
Sure.
The state of Maryland does not use TMDL. They use what's called the benthic index and the fish biotic index to measure the health of streams. Is there a correlation?
There's a lot of different measurements. And these measurements either to prove how bad the water quality is or to prove how it's improving.
So the EPA...
We question a lot of the models.
Well, and that's the second question. Who verified, validated, and accredited the Chesapeake Bay program's model? Because everything they've done is based upon their model, version 5.
Right.
Who validated, verified, and accredited?
That's a good question, but we think the model's flawed just on the way it's assumed what's happening at the Conowingo.
And the third question, can Harford County withdraw their WIP and reconstruct it? Harford County's bill is $90 million. Everybody that thinks that task force is going to help you, they can't spend $15 million this year. And for all those who care, it's not going to be objective. Everybody got to appoint one member. There's one member, Heather Cesar, who is the Baltimore Corps of Engineers representative to the Chesapeake Bay program. You think she's objective? Okay. And by the way, the council wouldn't be here tonight. They're voting on the budget. So if you feel that tug in your back pocket where your wallet is, they're setting the tax rate too. So can they withdraw their...
Well, let me to answer a couple of your questions. First on the scientific models, and it's a good point. Here's one: the coalition doesn't have the resources to hire its own independent scientist to disprove the models. What we have done as lawyers is read a lot of the material that's out there. We've analyzed it, and we've been able to form what we think are pretty solid conclusions about flaws in the modeling. And we have evidence that shows even EPA wrote to the state of Maryland, when the state of Maryland was doing its WIP plans, and the state of Maryland decided our county governments are going to do WIPs. Now, mind you, no other base state that was supposed to do a statewide WIP pushed it down to their counties, okay? It was only Maryland that decided to do that. There is a letter from EPA to the state of Maryland saying, whoa, 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 our model is not prepared to handle county-specific loading data. We think we're ready to handle it on a basin-wide level, but not county-specific. And yet, the state of Maryland told the counties, you will do a local WIP. Now, there's a good side to it, I guess, where they say to the local governments, you tell us you think the best way to improve water quality. But they basically said, you will focus on septics, you will focus on wastewater treatment plant upgrades, and you will focus on stormwater management. So here's what the coalition counties are going to do with their WIPs. And this is one of the things we're doing for them. We are helping them do supplements to their WIPs that get the focus off the activities the state said is the way to do it, and instead have the county say, no, this is the way we're going to improve water quality. One activity is we're going to be engaged in the relicensing, because we really think until we get some conditions on that dam to make some improvements, we're wasting a lot of money. The other thing we're going to do, a lot of our member counties want to have in their local WIP that they're going to pursue oyster restoration. That they want to say, this is how locally we're going to improve water quality by coming up with a way to help the oyster different than the way the state of Maryland says to help the oyster. So the WIPs, we think, are still up for grabs as far as what local governments have adopted. That's a plan. Remember, local plans matter. Local comprehensive plans matter. Okay? So if a local government, with input from its local citizens, develops a plan, they're supposed to matter. So instead of these WIPs being prescribed and spoon-fed, turn them around and local governments say, hey, okay, our WIP's going to really say things that we think are going to make a difference.
The only problem with that, though, sir, is that the discharge permit for those counties is up for renewal.
Now you're talking about stormwater. When you talk about the $90 billion, were you talking about the stormwater retrofit?
And that's tied to the discharge permit and the renewal. All those counties, those counties have their discharge permits that are coming up for renewal today.
But those are permits with limits put on them by regulators, basing them on something. And until somebody says, no, we're not going to accept the permit with those conditions, and push back. But you got to be ready to push back and have done the research to push back. I mean, you're right. Those are important permits, those MS4 permits, for a lot of activities going on in those counties. But if the regulators just come and say, here's your permit and here's all the conditions, those are negotiable. But you got to be prepared to negotiate. And back to the question about what to do with the dredge, I just want to make another observation. I don't have all the answers, I know, but look at this as a jobs creation opportunity. If everybody got focused on this issue, that we have to address the dredging, then find a way to make it an all-hands-on-deck activity for contractors in Pennsylvania and Maryland. If they can find a place to safely put it, let the dredging begin and let it go on for 5 years. But will that cost $14.5 billion? but that's what we're going to spend on all these other activities.
Yes, it's true that the county council is voting on the budget tonight, but they were asked to say Mr. Rogers is one of the representatives. He's the only one here. So if that task force, the members of the task force could be here, the county council's legislative aides could be here, there could be somebody here from the county executive's office. We don't see any of them. We see Mr. Roy. So if that task force is nothing more than political cover for the county council, then that's what it is. But if they really need to do something, they should at least have been here to listen to Mr. Macleod, who gave an excellent presentation.
If you've learned nothing else, the thing that we've had reiterated is the fact that state, local governments will take the path of least resistance sometimes, and the path that taxes you best and most. To tax your septic tank, if you live in Allegheny County or wherever you live, to solve the tiniest bit of this problem and not solve the real problem, that's never miss a great opportunity to tax people, right? Seriously. So I urge you to actually talk to your representatives in the county, ask them why they haven't talked to these people, why they haven't listened to what they have to say, why they haven't joined this coalition, instead of preparing to perhaps just lay down and do whatever the state of Maryland says based on flawed science and the thought that let's get these people with septic tanks to pay for it. I mean, it's just there's just so many things wrong with this. Thanks. Let's give them one more hand. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got open mic starting in just a moment, but I want to take one quick second to thank everyone who's here for the first time or who invited someone new. There's only one door prize tonight. It's a wonderful Campaign for Liberty t-shirt. You can have any size you want as long as it's medium. No, I'm just kidding. You're going to take this medium and you can trade it for a box in the back. It sounds like Money Hall or something. Anyway, there's Sylvia in the back and you can get whatever size you want. So the winner of tonight's drawing for the Campaign for Liberty t-shirt is, let's see, who paid me the most money? 190. The three last digits, 190. 190, 190, going once, going twice. Woohoo, somebody yelled. You just yelled to mess me. Oh, you got it? All right. All right, there you go. There you go. All right, now there's a contest going on to decide whose donation bucket gets the most. No, I'm just kidding. Basically, this room costs us $250. All the other things that we do at night, so all the other things that we do, robocalls and mailing and all this kind of stuff. Nobody takes a salary, nobody gets paid, but we'd love to have you help support our group and what we're doing to defend your Second Amendment rights, your rights to good county, local, state, and national government. So if you can contribute, we appreciate this. There's going to be a bunch of this coming from the back. Make sure mine has the most money. No, I'm just kidding.
Is that the IRS joke?
There you go. It's open mic time, and everyone's agreed to be really brief tonight, so we're happy about that. Our first open mic speaker is Susan Payne. And then Matt Heinbach is on deck, and Vicki Seitzinger is in the hole. Okay. Vicki Seitzinger is on deck. I'll let you do that if you like.
Oh, sure, that's fine.
Wait a minute. Now I'll let you do that.
Okay. First of all, I'm Sue Payne. I'm from Montgomery County. We like to call it Moco Loco down there, because all the bad legislation originates in Montgomery County. And first I want to thank you for letting me come up and talk about the gun referendum. I'm doing the petition drive to try to put the gun bill on the ballot so the citizens can overturn it. O'Malley signed it into law on the 16th of May. And at the same time, he signed the 20 cents a gallon gas increase and gas tax, and he also signed the budget. And so I took it upon myself, because no one else was doing it, to try to collect the signatures that we need to put this on the ballot. And I brought some petitions here tonight, and I'm hoping that you will come up and sign, because if we don't meet our deadline on Friday, this bill becomes law in October, and that's the end of it. We will, and it's a very restrictive law. And the other states that have passed restrictive gun laws do not have the right to referendum, and we do. And so it's really important that we do it. It's also really important, I don't have my glasses tonight, but my sunglasses for prescription, so I can't see anyone out there, so I'm just going to wave to everyone. I want to make sure that the people know I'm registered unaffiliated. I'm not affiliated with either party, but I've been amazed at the amount of resistance I've gotten from the establishment Republicans. They've openly told people not to sign my petition, and they've openly tried to stonewall me. But 2 elected representatives in Annapolis have helped me openly, have collected petitions from me, and have given me support, and I'm really tired. And I want to acknowledge them tonight because they're both from Harford County. Glenn Glass, Delegate Glenn Glass, if he's still here. Delegate Glenn Glass has driven enormous amounts of distances to meet me, to pick up petitions, I've used him as a resource for folks who don't have a computer and need to download the petition. And Delegate Pat McDonough, who I could not do this without. I've been working as an activist in Annapolis for many years, and I've done a lot of work for a lot of representatives, and I was stunned when I asked them if they would use their personal mailing list to send out an email blast to tell people that this was going to referendum, and would they please just let people know about my website, which is freestatepetitions.com. And I just was astounded how the stonewalling that I got, the name calling, the new elected head of the Republican Party, Nick Kipke, is openly calling me names I heard in kindergarten. So this is the kind of stuff that I'm up against. And so don't think that the newly elected head of the delegation in Annapolis is on your side, because they're not. And they're not on the voices of the people's side. What Delegate Glass and Delegate McDonough are doing by helping me is giving a voice to the voters. They're allowing the voters to have the last say on whether or not we allow this state to strip us of our Second Amendment rights. And what the other side is doing, including Mr. Neil Parrott and his MD petitions, which I'll have a lot to say about on Friday when I have my press conference in Annapolis, they've actually tried to stifle your voice, tried to say, you don't matter, you can come down to Annapolis, you can wait 15 hours to speak, and it doesn't matter. I'm not going to do it. So I'm a volunteer. I've got 3 kids in college. My son is here tonight to collect petitions. He's helping me. And I just want to thank Harford County, because not only that, every petition that's being mailed to my website, to my post office box, is done right. Everybody reads instructions up here in Harford County. They fill it out right. They sign it, the circulator. And these 2 delegates, though, you guys are blessed, because it's the scoundrels in Montgomery County that began this effort to strip you of your rights. But hopefully it will be someone with some common sense in Montgomery County that restores them back to you. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. How many signatures do you have, sir?
I don't have a count. I will not have a count till Friday at noon.
Okay. And she brought a road cheering section. I love that. That's awesome. Thanks, you guys, for coming to support her. Go ahead, Vic.
All right, I'm going to be really quick here. I want to tell you a little story. In the beginning, it's going to sound like I'm rambling, but in the end, you're going to get the message. Since I have not been working, I've been spending a lot of time going to local political meetings, local clubs, going to county council meetings, whatever, and I've gotten to know some folks. Recently, after one of those meetings, I went out for a drink and a bite to eat at a local establishment. And when I arrived there with 3 of Harford County's elected officials, we talked a little bit about the IRS scandal. We all agreed that it was scandalous, and that it was a horrible abuse of power, and that potentially could bring down the Obama administration. Wouldn't that be great? But we all agreed that what was done was deplorable. 15-20 minutes after that, another person joined us and talked a little about an elected official in Baltimore County doing something similar, abusing the power of his office to punish a political opponent. And that really didn't seem quite so bad to this group. And then they jokingly refer to a Harford County official who did the same thing. And that seemed kind of funny too. Now, I can tell you that none of those elected officials are in this room tonight, so if you're wondering who it is, I'm not going to tell you. And if you're, and the other thing is, I have no idea if the allegation that against these people that was made was true or not. But here's what really threw me for a loop and made me realize how corrupt our elected officials can be if we let them be. All three of these Harford County elected officials laughed and thought it was funny that that this corruption was being practiced in Harford County. And when I pointed out to all three of them that there was no difference between that and what the IRS and the Obama administration were perpetrating, they chastised me for being naive, told me I didn't understand how the game was played, and basically patted me on my pretty little head and told me to go home. So what I'm telling you is that we need to hold all our officials accountable. The Republicans, the Democrats, everyone. Just because your guy is in office doesn't mean your guy or your gal is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So if you're as appalled by that little story as I am, get out, get to know these folks, watch what they do, learn their names. Not all of them are bad. I've talked to plenty of them that are wonderful. They're great people. They do great things. But we need to be careful. We cannot fall asleep because there is corruption everywhere. So I'm sorry to have to tell you.
Our next two speakers are Stephen Jones. Are you here?
I'm not Stephen. I am.
Okay. All right. You're on deck. I'll let Al go because he's just here first.
Go ahead.
We're going fast.
Go ahead. Don't worry about it.
I'm letting you know that the IOTC is having their first Friday, not this Friday, next Friday. The subject is going to be the case against case law. So if there's any lawyers here, you know any lawyers, send to see this guy, Michael Kruger, talk. The other question is, been with this non-permeable rain tax we have, with your houses and your driveways, and that's why we have all. Why am I pumping a ton of water out from underneath my friggin' house if it's non-permeable? Where's that water coming from?
Go ahead, Stephen. And then Dan, you're on deck.
How y'all doing tonight? Good. I wanted to say a few things. I went to the Route 40 Republican Club earlier this month, and we had a good meeting, and I wanted to bring up something a couple of the members were discussing. We do have arguments occasionally with groups, and something was brought up with one of the members and a couple of members. There were people from Campaign for Liberty there. I was kind of concerned noticing that, we are divided as a party, as a belief, as conservatives. But I wanted to say that, we're in this together. It's not easy agreeing. Some people might like one person in an election, other people like another. But when it boils down to, we're basically facing off with the political party, the Democrats, who have the power of the media, educational system, a lot of things they have power over. So I want to remind you all that, we don't always see eye to eye, whether you be with the Route 40 Republican Club or Harford County GOP or Campaign for Liberty, Tea Party. I just want to say that you all need to remember that we are in this together. We need to be united and stand as one. So we're going to beat the Democrats. We're going to have to do that efficiently and as one group. Do you understand? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dan Galuso. I was here last month. We were trying to work a schedule so I could speak with you more. I was a National Security Agency field operative when I sort of retired. In Harford County, I lived here 40 years, raised 3 children. It just gets to the point where I pretty much can't stand being quiet anymore. I think we're all patriots. I don't think that any one of us wants to do anything but good. I love my country. I fear my government. the biggest thing that I wanted to do was to promote something, 3 parts. One, how to protect yourselves against government, individually and as a group. I'm afraid that quite possibly with the concept of a militia, it may scare some people. I don't want to arm anyone. I want you to be armed. I don't want anyone who can't protect themselves do something that they're going to get hurt on. I'm basically nonviolent. I believe in Mahatma Gandhi. He took down an entire empire without firing a shot personally. But there are things you can do to protect yourselves and your families. And I wanted to show you that. The second thing I wanted to do, I wanted to promote citizen representatives being elected under term limits, being elected by qualifications of merit, promising not to get rich after they are elected, protecting and defending the Constitution, doing their work and going home. That's what The third thing, which is quite important to me, is I want to promote an awareness among young people. We all know what the educational system has done to our young people. My heart absolutely bleeds to see what's happening to them. When I went to Loyola College, before graduation, I had 12 job offers. These kids can't get work. We've exported work. Are they telling us that our people can't make anything? Are they telling us that our young men and women don't have the capacity to be trained? Are they telling us that no longer as a nation we can't feed the world, but China can?
Yeah.
I want to promote the young people to stand up for themselves. This is more than just about voting. This is about the Constitution and the freedoms that come from it. We do not want to depend on government to assure our freedoms. We have those freedoms. They're inalienable. They can't take them from us. We were born with them. Now, we were put on this earth to do things. We can't do all things. But the things we can do and collectively come together and help each other, we can be a very strong force non-violently. I would love to present my thoughts to you further. I thank you for being patriots. I feel very comfortable with people that understand what I'm saying. And God bless all of you, and God bless America.
By popular demand, Dan will be back next month, so don't miss next month's meeting. Betty, if you can take 1 minute. Is it possible?
Hello, terrorists. Real quickly, Americans for Prosperity are our brothers and sisters in the freedom movement. They only have a meeting about quarterly, about every 3 months. Tomorrow night, and it's over in Baltimore County, if you can make it, the Towson Library right there on York Road, and the meters that you can park right on the streets within 2 blocks. The meters are off after 6 o'clock. It's always very stimulating, and if you can make it 7 p.m., Towson Library on the lower level. And the other thing, do any of you listen regularly to Sean Hannity? Yeah. Did you listen to him last Friday afternoon at 3:24 p.m.? Guess who made it on Sean Hannity? And I quoted the same Patrick Henry quote about the Constitution that I said in Brian Frosch's and Jamie Raskin's faces when I testified in Annapolis what the Constitution is. And Rose, who was filling in, she said, that's awesome. So 14 million people heard that quote. And so God opened a door. Hang in, be an activist, continue to resist and obstruct the soft dictator in the White House and the little soft dictator in the Annapolis State House. God bless.
Amen. And just for 15 seconds before our final speaker comes up, Scott, you can come on up. This gentleman wanted to say something in support of Susan's petition drive, and he has an interesting viewpoint on it.
Thank you, Dr.
Folks, my name is Martin Johnson. I'm not running for anything, unlike a lot of people I run into nowadays. But I was a cop for 25 years. I arrested a lot of people, a lot of bad guys carrying a lot of illegal guns. I drove, total tonight, I'm driving 2.5 hours round trip so that Sue can sign me up tonight for the referendum. It's very important. I've read every word of that law. I used to arrest people based on laws. This is nonsense. Not a single thing in the gun law that was passed, not a single thing would have prevented any of the tragic shootings anywhere. And I worked on the DC sniper case on the school security task force. Nothing in there helps anything. Nothing in there is going to help any cop. So I just encourage you to get on that referendum. That's the truth.
Thank you so much. That's the amazing thing about our meeting is that it brings out people with such quality and character and integrity that everyone here could be up here speaking to the group because you guys are just great people. We just appreciate you being here. Scott, you're our final speaker. I want you to come up and share with us about SB 281. And wait till you see this video. This woman is so phenomenal. It's brief, but it's awesome.
This woman, by the way, before you hit the start button, she's testifying for the New Jersey State Senate because New Jersey is getting ready to craft a gun bill just like the one that they put in Annapolis, only you won't see it here, but a couple of New Jersey state senators were caught on a hot mic talking about how the goal of their bill was confiscation of firearms. So, Nora, take it away.
I listen to what other people say, and I think I want to address what Ms. Weinberg said about this being personal. This is personal. This is personal to me. And I take it personally because I took an oath when I joined the military in 1970 to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Another thing people say all the time is, let's respect the other guy's opinion. I cannot respect an oath breaker. Anybody who's holding a public office has taken the oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. That does not mean you put how you feel first, how you emotionally react to a tragedy first. Because you think it's better that I will be safer, you abrogate my constitutional rights. That's breaking your oath, and I have no respect for that. I'm afraid of. And that's the people in elected office taking away my rights. I'm not afraid of the drugs that come to my door because if my dogs don't get them, I will. It's not your job to protect me. It's not your job to defend me. It's your job to protect the Constitution and protect my rights to defend myself. Personal tragedy in their family. We've all gone through tragedies, particularly people like me whose family goes back generations in the military without a lot of caskets in the ground that are dead by gun bullets. But the whole thing about gun laws is synonymous to drunken drivers and cars. Drunken drivers misuse cars and kill people. They kill thousands of children. A lot of our teenagers. Do we ban cars? No, we don't. We're not trying to get rid of a car with a bigger engine. All right, or a car that, we go faster than the other one. This is utterly and completely ridiculous. Thank you.
Sergeant Friday said just the facts, man. Okay, I'm going to try to rip through this because we don't have a lot of time left. But I was asked to, give an update on, what's going on with the recent flurry of anti-Second Amendment legislation that's going through Congress and Maryland and other states such as Colorado and New York. Now, it looks like we're probably okay for now in the Congress because thanks to Rand Paul and Mike Lee and Mr. Cruz, they said that they were going to filibuster any attempts at anti-Second Amendment legislation, so it looks like that's kind of over for now, but they can continue to try to sneak this stuff in through other bills that have to pass, so we have to be careful. In New York, so far, the reaction has been massive resistance and non-compliance. Gun owners are not registering their firearms, and this is probably the largest act of civil disobedience in the history of this country. In Colorado, the state passed a law very similar to the Federal SAFE Act that was proposed by Adolph Feinstein. The act bears a strong resemblance to SB 281, the Maryland Firearms Safety Act, but the reaction there was that 54 of their 63 county sheriffs are enjoining a lawsuit to overturn that legislation. 54 of 63 county sheriffs said no, not on my watch, and they're taking it to court. Now, that brings us to the People's Republic of Maryland. What's going on here recently, if you've been had your ear to the ground, several counties have passed resolutions in support of Second Amendment rights of their citizens, and some are pretty strong and others are, well, not so much. So far, the counties of Carroll, Cecil, and Hartford have passed these resolutions. Now, I have to admit that I'm not a big believer in resolutions. I think they're mostly fluff for weak politicians so that they have political cover at election time. They can say, oh, I voted for the Second Amendment safety resolution of 2013, and then they really don't do anything to kind of move the ball forward. So I'm not a big fan of these resolutions. However, they are a statement of sentiment, and we'll take whatever we can get at these days. Now, the best of these resolutions, as expected, comes from Carroll County, and it was drafted and initiated by Commissioner Richard Rothschild, who I'm sure some of you have met here. This resolution is important. Really, it's important because not only does it have the backing of the commissioners of Carroll County, it also has the backing of their Carroll County Sheriff and the Carroll County State's Attorney. This is actually something that's got some teeth in it, and last Wednesday the Carroll Commissioners voted 4-0 in favor of this resolution, and they had a commissioner that didn't attend, but he said a statement of support, so his vote, he didn't get to vote, but he said, yeah, I'm with you, even though he didn't show up. Each one of these commissioners took turns reading a portion of this resolution, but Commissioner Robin Fraser got the largest response when she read the portion of the resolution which said, quote, "The board hereby declares null and void within Carroll County elements of any and all international treaties, including the UN Arms Trade Treaty, that infringe on the rights of citizens to keep and bear arms." And the place went like I said, Jerry Barnes, who is the state's attorney over there, and Sheriff Ken Tregening, I guess is his name, said that they supported this resolution as well. Now, SB 281 cannot be considered a law because it is unconstitutional. It is what Jefferson called a pretended act of legislation. Now, this Carroll resolution was really pretty amazing because they cited things in here like Article 2 of the Maryland Declaration of Rights, which says, "The Constitution of the United States and the laws made or which shall be made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges of this state and the people of this state are bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or law of this state to the contrary notwithstanding." They also quoted Article 6 of the Maryland Declaration of Rights, a portion of which reads, "A doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive to the goodness and happiness of mankind." Now, these guys did their homework because in this resolution they're quoting John Adams. They're quoting Thomas Jefferson. They're quoting Alexander Hamilton from Federalist 78. A lot of really good background information, and then it gets into the resolution. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm just going to read parts of it. Whereas the Supreme Court of the District of Columbia versus Heller affirmed the right of the people to keep and bear arms as unconnected to any service in the militia. So they're quoting the Heller case in D.C. They're quoting the Miller case out of the Supreme Court, where the right to common defense is protected by the Second Amendment. Here's another really good one. Whereas the Maryland General Assembly has enacted the Maryland Firearms Safety Act of 2013, which bans the sale of 45 types of ordinary rifles and magazines that could contribute to the common defense and requires law-abiding citizens to submit to licensing fees, background checks, fingerprinting, safety training, and renewal fees. Whereas the board reasonably believes that the Maryland Firearms Safety Act violates the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which clearly states the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Whereas the board took an oath to support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, it is therefore resolved to protect our citizens' constitutional rights. Carroll County, Maryland is herein declared a Second Amendment sanctuary county. And then it goes on, the board reasonably believes the Maryland Firearms Safety Act to be pretended, aka unconstitutional legislation, and be it further resolved, this is awesome, be it further resolved that the citizens of Carroll County herein direct the Carroll County government will not authorize or appropriate government funds, resources, employees, agencies, contractors, buildings, detention centers, or offices for the purpose of enforcing any element of the Maryland Firearms Safety Act that infringes on the right of the people to keep and bear arms, including but not limited to the following: registration requirements for lawfully existing firearms, prohibitions against limiting hand grips. So they're saying they're not going to enforce these pieces of the Firearms Safety Act that bans hand grips and flash suppressors and magazine capacities and things of that nature. So, I mean, they really kind of get into it and they really step out there in defense of their citizens. Now, it goes on and it says, the board affirms in its support the duly elected sheriff of Carroll County, Maryland shall exercise his or her sound discretion and affirms its resolve to support decisions made by our sheriff in the discretionary enforcement of the Maryland Firearms Safety Act against any citizen unless engaged in the commission of a crime of violence, a violent act, or has otherwise been convicted of a prior felony. I told you about the UN piece of it. You know, they said that is null and void. And then it goes on to say, the board affirms its support for the acquisition or creation and airing within Carroll County of a video documentary discussing Second Amendment concepts, potential remedies available to citizens when confronted with unconstitutional infringements on their liberties, case studies to include examples such as the Rosa Parks incident. The board will from time to time update this resolution. Future amendments may include, but are not limited to, reciprocity agreements between Carroll and other Maryland counties and other non-Maryland counties. So I thought this was pretty cool. I mean, they're stepping out and like really saying, hey guys, we're not playing this game in Carroll County. So I thought that was really pretty cool. So then Cecil passed a similar resolution, but folks, I got to tell you, we got some work to do here in Harford County. The Harford County resolution, I'm going to read the Harford County resolution to you, and it's one page. And here's what it says. Whereas the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States was adopted in 1791 as part of the United States Bill of Rights, and whereas the Second Amendment to the Constitution protects the inalienable and individual right of the people to keep and bear arms, and whereas the Maryland General Assembly enacted the Maryland Firearms Safety Act of 2013, which bans the sale of 45 types of rifles and magazines in common use, requiring law-abiding citizens to submit to licensing fees, background checks, fingerprinting, safety training, and the renewal fees. Whereas the County Council believes that the Firearms Safety Act contains sections which may be unconstitutional. They just quoted the Constitution.
Maybe they are.
And then they're saying that, well, you're banning all these things and it may be unconstitutional. The council should continue to analyze additional actions possible to protect the rights of the citizens of Harford County and to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment. Whereas the undersigned council members took an oath to support and defend the United States Constitution, now therefore be it resolved that it is the opinion of the County Council of Harford County that sections of the Maryland Firearms Safety Act of 2013 may be in violation of the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. And be it further resolved that the County Council recommends that Harford County government further analyze this legislation to ensure that there are no restrictions or regulations that inhibit, reduce, impinge what we believe are law-abiding citizens. Does this seem schizophrenic to you?
Yes.
It does to me. It does to me. Notwithstanding the above, this resolution is not intended to negate or provisions of new gun laws that would prohibit the sale or possession of weapons by felons, prohibit the sale or possession of weapons by individuals with a history of dangerous mental illness, who have been adjudicated mentally ill or required reasonable safety training provided it is readily available, reasonable, and affordable. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm just saying that it was pretty amazing to me.
Maybe a bunch of junk.
We believe.
There's more starch in a bowl of tapioca pudding than what's in this quote-unquote resolution. Now, this was initiated in response to the Cecil resolution, which happened. Now, Billy Boniface, the Cecil resolution is very similar to the Carroll one that I just read to you. And Billy Boniface, if you go back and if you look at the video, he said that he looked at that language earlier. They were presented with this same ordinance. They had a chance to pass this same resolution. They declined to rewrite it into what I just read to you because it was inflammatory. Ms. Lasanti said that this language was very strong against the Maryland State Legislature. And she was very uncomfortable with it. Now, the resolution passed, but interestingly, if you go to the county website, it wasn't even on the agenda for the evening. Because if you go to watch the video, they have the agenda for the evening. It wasn't even on the agenda. I was like, am I in the right place? Am I looking for this? And I just got down to resolutions. They had some other resolution that they were talking about, and I just clicked on that part of it. And sure enough, there it was, and they were talking about it. They spent like 40 minutes talking about this piece of puff. So it was passed 6-1, but I was really, like I said, I was thunderstruck when I read this because, like I said, I think these resolutions are a bunch of fluff and just political fig leaves for weak politicians. But man, if you're going to do it, at least do it right. But I really wasn't prepared for the weakness that I saw that was presented on that page. Now, the Harford County Council now is on the record that SB 281 may be unconstitutional and that they're going to further analyze it to make sure that there's no restrictions on your Second Amendment rights. Now, what we don't know is what the position of our county executive and our county sheriff is on this issue. I'm not aware, but I haven't seen a public statement from Mr. Craig on the constitutionality of SB 281, and to my knowledge, Sheriff Bain has not issued any public statement as to his thoughts on the constitutionality of it either. But our sheriff is our next to last line of self-defense against these unconstitutional acts, usurpations of our rights as free men and women. The jury, which is all of you, is our last line of defense through jury nullification. Now, the people of Hartford County need to know where our county executive and where our county sheriff stand on this issue. We need to know if they will uphold their oaths and prevent the exercise of these unconstitutional acts. Now, if they are not willing to commit now when things are easy, what's going to happen when things get harder? Because things are going to get harder. For the freedom and liberty to prevail, we must insist that our sheriffs stand up for our rights. Carroll County is leading the way by resolving not to use county resources to enforce SB 281. They've led with their sheriff and their state's attorney agreeing that they're not going to enforce an otherwise unconstitutional law on their otherwise law-abiding citizens. We need that same commitment here in Hartford County.
Yes.
What we can hope is that other counties will continue to band together to oppose this tyranny and arbitrary use of power. Because Maryland Declaration of Rights, Article 6 says that non-resistance against arbitrary power is absurd, slavish, and destructive to the good and happiness of mankind. Now, your mission tonight when you leave here is I have these sheets right here, and on it, it has the contact information for David Craig, Jesse Bain, and Joe Castley, who is our state's attorney. You should call them or email them and ask them, will you stand up and defend my rights under the Second Amendment of the Constitution to keep and bear arms against the unconstitutional acts of SB 281? They need to be on the record. They need to be able to tell you. And if they're not willing to do it, then that needs to be duly noted. So I'll leave these. If you guys want these, you can hand them out, pass them around if you want.
Scott, I say if you're not willing to do it, we have to be ready to elect someone who...
Yes. Well, they're all running for something coming up. I don't know what Jesse's doing, but the county executive's running for something. We don't know what that is yet. And I don't know where Mr. Castley is going to be, but so I'm just going to leave you with a couple final thoughts. Free people ought not to be only armed and disciplined, but they should have sufficient arms and ammunition to maintain the status of independence from anyone who might attempt to abuse them, which would include their own government. And that was George Washington. Jefferson said, "I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery." And I love this one. "Necessity is the plea for the infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants in the creed of slaves. We must do something." That was by William Pitt, who was a former Prime Minister of Great Britain during the Revolutionary War. So, you have the information, you should contact them and hold them accountable. And if they're unwilling to answer and they're unwilling to say that they're going to stand up and defend your rights, then we need to find somebody else next time around. God bless you all, and God bless America.
Three quick things. Please take action. Call the people on that list. Sign the petition. Thank you for coming. Fourth Tuesday is June 25th. Fourth Tuesday is June 25th. Mark it on your calendar.